Chapter 7. Speaking of love. I figured writing a book about Jesus would mean the topic of love might spill over into more than one chapter. So here's more. It's been said before, but it's worth repeating. Love is a verb. It's not a squishy feeling in the stomach you get when you see that special person. It's not something you feel, it's something you do. What you think feels like love is actually affection. Just when we think we have the concept of love figured out, along comes unconditional love. It blows away our human-based ideas on what love is. Authentic love is unconditional. There's no such thing as "I'll love you if." Likewise, there's no such thing as "if you loved me, you would." Those are conditions. Love merely says, "I love you, therefore I want what's best for you." When we place conditions on love, it's no longer love. It becomes a transaction, no different from exchanging money or bartering goods and services. Unconditional love is hard. In fact, when we've been hurt, it seems impossible. Every human being is made in the image of God, even the ones who we consider despicable and deplorable. God loves the murderer, the abuser, the drug dealer, the rapist, and the drunk driver, just as He loves you. We're called to love people as God does. So how then are we supposed to love those people? Well, the good news is that loving people is not a skill we are expected to master overnight. But as we get closer to God and more intimately familiar with how He works, we'll be able to let His Spirit take over. And the more God's Spirit lives in us, the less concerned we'll be with vengeance after we've been hurt. We'll start to see all people, even the bad ones, as His children who were born into a fallen, sinful nature just like we were. Jesus' command to love your enemies in Luke 6:27-36 sounds simple when the word enemy is just some ambiguous concept. Sure, I can love them, no big deal. But when we're the recipients of true injustice, injury, or hatred, do we have the same attitude? His command to do good to those who hate you from Luke 6:27 is such an odd concept, and it was probably just as weird to hear it back in 30 AD when he said it out loud. But what do you think will happen if you show love to someone who hates you? You may find that you start to run out of enemies. Sure, there will always be those who take advantage of your kindness, and there's nothing wrong with keeping yourself from being abused. In fact, if you're in an abusive situation, I strongly urge you to get out. But sometimes all it takes to love someone is to not retaliate when we're shown hatred. We humans aren't conditioned for that, are we? We feel like we need to have the last word or that drop-the-mic parting shot that will devastate the opponent. But what would happen if we just showed love? It takes discipline. But practice makes better, as my wife always says. The more we keep in mind the sin we were saved from, the better prepared we'll be to extend grace to others, even to our enemies. Look at Jesus' example. After His own people had turned Him in, after He had been tortured and ridiculed, after the Romans had hung Him up on the cross for public execution, He loved them. He loved them all. Jesus prayed, "Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing." Luke 23:34. It's a process. Finally, there's nothing I can say to take away the feeling of vengeance you may have towards someone. You may want the person who hurt you to rot in hell, and I totally get it. I wouldn't tell you to be dishonest about your feelings. The desire for revenge can be a very real human craving when we've been seriously hurt. But when we allow God to take over our desires, He begins the process of conforming those desires to look more like His. Notice I said process. Once you've decided to follow Him, He starts to change you from the inside out, and it's not usually an overnight thing. Growing closer to God is a process that takes a lifetime.